Kodak Black has ended his deal with Capitol Records and is now independent. The problem is that Capitol doesn't seem happy about it. The label is criticizing Kodak and making some serious claims about what happened behind the scenes. Let me break it down. $30 million. That's the number being thrown around when Kodak Black made one of the most talked about label switches in recent rap history. Following the release of his viral singles Walk Spin, Kodak announced his departure from Atlantic Records and that he would sign to Capitol Records for an 8-figure record deal. 8 figures. That's at least $10 million. And the reports didn't stop there. The number getting circulated across social media, across rap news accounts, was 30 million. For a kid from Pompano Beach, Florida, who grew up choosing between selling drugs and rapping, that kind of contract isn't just a business decision, it's a statement. It's the validation that the streaming numbers and the billboard placements and the years of grinding through arrests and legal battles had finally converted into something real, something institutional. And Capitol Records wasn't a random choice. The new deal at Capitol would reunite Kodak with Orlando Wharton, the man who originally signed him to Atlantic back in 2015, who was now at Capitol as executive VP and president of the relaunched Priority Records. So this wasn't cold outreach between strangers. This was a reunion. Wharton knew what Kodak was capable of. He'd seen it firsthand. He signed him when the kid was 18 years old with a handful of SoundCloud uploads and a Pompano Beach buzz. And now he was on the other side of the table with the resources of Capitol Music Group behind him, ready to write the check. But before any of that could happen, Kodak had to clean his plate at Atlantic. Atlantic Records would no longer have Kodak Black on their roster after he completed his contractual obligations. According to Billboard, the rapper was heading to Capitol Records for the next chapter of his career. The key phrase there is contractual obligations. He wasn't a free agent yet. He still owed Atlantic music. Sources familiar with the situation noted that Black still had 2 releases left under his agreement with Atlantic. 2 more projects, 2 more deliveries, before he could walk through the door at Capitol with clean hands. That's a position Kodak had put himself in by pushing for something Atlantic wasn't willing to give him months after asking Atlantic Records to renegotiate his deal to put him on par with NBA YoungBoy. Kodak stated he would not re-sign with Atlantic when his contract was up and would instead join Capitol Records. That renegotiation request is worth pausing on. He went to Atlantic and essentially said, "Look at what you're paying YoungBoy. Look at what I'm doing on the charts. Pay me the same." And Atlantic said no, or at least whatever they came back with wasn't enough. So Kodak made a decision. And the thing about that decision is that he wasn't alone in his frustration. Kodak wasn't the only one. Frustrated with Atlantic, YoungBoy and Meek Mill had also spoken out about the label. And YoungBoy was also leaving from Motown Records. So there was a pattern here. Atlantic was losing its biggest acts, one by one, and the common thread was that artists felt the label wasn't compensating them in proportion to what they were generating. When you've got 3 of your biggest names either gone or publicly unhappy, that's not a coincidence, that's a structural problem inside the building. For Kodak specifically, the frustration had been building for a while. He'd watched his streaming numbers climb. He'd watched Super Gremlin go to number 3 on the Hot 100. He'd built enormous success under Atlantic since his debut album Painting Pictures in 2017, counting 34 entries on the Billboard Hot 100, including Super Gremlin, which peaked at number 3. 34 chart entries. At the time he made the announcement to leave, he had proven himself repeatedly. The argument wasn't pay me because of what I might do. The argument was pay me because of what I've already done. Atlantic didn't agree with the math. Capitol did. The final project he owed Atlantic would end up being the exclamation point on the whole relationship. Kodak's final project with Atlantic, Cutthroat Bill, Vol 1 was released on October 28, 2022, and proceeded to peak at number 8 on the Billboard 200. Number 8 on the Billboard 200. That's his send-off to the label that gave him his first million. He walked out the door with a top 10 album, which, depending on your perspective, is either a final gift to Atlantic or a final reminder to the industry of what Capitol was about to get its hands on. Either way, the numbers did the talking, and the industry was watching. The rapper's eventual move followed last month's announcement that Orlando Wharton, who previously signed Black to Atlantic, had joined Capitol as executive VP and president of the relaunched Priority Records. The timing wasn't accidental. Wharton moving to Capitol was the green light. It was the signal to Kodak that there was someone at the new address who already understood him, who already believed in him, and who was ready to build something bigger. than what Atlantic had been willing to construct. The money angle is worth digging into further because the reported $30 million tells you something important about how both sides saw this deal. From Capitol's perspective, they were acquiring one of the most prolific, most consistent generators of streaming revenue in rap. When he moved to Capitol, he would be one of the biggest active artists on the label's roster. Think about what that means in practical terms for Capitol. This isn't a developing act. This isn't a bet on someone's potential. Kodak's catalog was already enormous. His audience was already loyal and enormous, and his ability to release music consistently, even through periods of incarceration, legal pressure, and personal chaos, was unmatched in the game. You don't hand someone $30 million because you like their energy. You hand them $30 million because the math on their back catalog and current momentum says you're going to make it back. And then some. From Kodak's perspective, the money was the validation he'd been denied at Atlantic. A music industry lawyer noted, "It's rough when an artist gets locked in with a team that has lost its appeal, or if the artist loses their champion in the building due to lateral movement or termination." That's exactly what happened. His champion, Wharton, left Atlantic, and suddenly the relationship at Atlantic didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a transaction. So Kodak followed his champion to the new house and brought $30 million worth of leverage with him. There's also the legal dimension that loomed over the whole transition, because Kodak Black never does anything in a clean, straightforward line. Lawyers pointed out that some artists make a critical mistake. When gearing up to switch labels, they turn in the final album, required by their contract, and then immediately begin recording music in anticipation of a new deal elsewhere. But many exclusive recording agreements extend for 9 to 12 months past the date that the last album was delivered or released, meaning songs that artists cut during this period still belong to their previous label partner. That's the kind of fine print that has swallowed careers. You think you're free, you've turned in the project, the streaming numbers are in, and you're already in the studio cooking for the new deal. But legally, you're still under contract. Everything you record in that window belongs to the old label. As one lawyer explained, artists may not be aware that in most record deals, the recording services remain exclusive during the entire term, and there's often a period of time in between the release of the last project and the end of that exclusive term. For Kodak, a man who records constantly, who releases mixtapes with the frequency other people release single tracks, that kind of window is particularly dangerous. The question of what was recorded when and who owns what would become a thread that ran through his entire relationship with Capitol. And what makes the Capitol deal so fascinating as a story is that it isn't just a rap story, it's a music industry story. In a world where acts are increasingly able to generate streams on their own, without help from a label, the balance of power in some deals has shifted. It's more common now to hear about buzzing artists signing a 1+1, or even a deal for one album with no options attached, if an act has a lot of streaming momentum. Kodak had as much streaming momentum as anyone in the game. His ability to move independently, to drop on SoundCloud, to build buzz on his own, meant that Capitol couldn't treat him the way labels used to treat artists. You can't lock someone into a 6-album deal when they can generate 100 million streams from their bedroom without you. Fewer options means that acts who are unhappy with their record company don't need to stay with that partner for long. If the relationship sours, that was the new reality, and Kodak's willingness to walk away from Atlantic and eventually walk away from Capitol was evidence that he understood the new leverage an artist had in the streaming era. He wasn't just a rapper making career decisions. He was an artist running a business and reading the market correctly. So when Capitol Records finally had Kodak Black on their roster, the expectations were enormous on both sides. The label had bet $30 million on a man who had never delivered, less than a top 10 album when he was locked in. They had Priority Records relaunched with the executive who knew him best. They had the infrastructure of Capitol Music Group, one of the oldest and most powerful labels in the history of the business. And they had Kodak, who, despite every obstacle thrown at him, every arrest, every legal battle, every period of incarceration, had always come back to the studio and dropped something the internet couldn't stop playing. For Kodak, this was supposed to be the chapter where everything clicked into place. The money was there. The respect was there. The man who believed in him first was back in his corner, and he was free from the Atlantic deal he'd felt was underpaying him for years. The stage was set. But this story was never going to be straightforward, because Kodak Black doesn't do straightforward. Between the moment he announced the deal and the moment he walked through Capitol's door, his life was already moving in 17 directions. There were legal matters hanging over him from before the Capitol deal was even signed. There were relationships, personal and professional, pulling in different directions. There were 5 children, custody disputes, and a personal life that regularly made headlines for reasons that had nothing to do with music. And Capitol knew all of this when they wrote the check. They knew exactly who they were signing. The question was never whether Kodak could make music that had been settled years ago. The question was always whether the business around the music could survive the chaos that followed him everywhere he went. That chaos was already part of his brand by the time Capitol came calling. Born Bill Kahan Capri and originally named Diosan Octave, he grew up in Pompano Beach, Florida, and gained initial recognition following the release of his 2014 songs No Flockin' and Skirt, both of which led him to sign a recording contract with Atlantic Records. He was a teenager when the labels came calling. He was barely 18 when Atlantic put him on their roster. And the music he made from the very beginning was rooted in a reality that most of the people at those label offices had never experienced. Kodak started rapping in elementary school and began going to a local trap house after school to record music. He spent his youth reading thesauruses and dictionaries to further his vocabulary. That combination, trap house survival instincts and a self-taught intellectual curiosity, is exactly what made his music resonate in a way that defied easy categorization. He wasn't performing a character. He was reporting from a life that was already fully formed before the industry found him. And the transition from that Pompano Beach kid to a $30 million Capitol Records artist is one of the more remarkable rises in the history of Florida rap. He was expelled from school in the 5th grade for fighting and was arrested for auto theft while in middle school. About his upbringing, he said he was given 2 options: sell drugs with a gun on his hip or rap that aren't abstract lyrics. That's the actual choice that was put in front of him as a child. And when you understand that context, when you understand the starting point, the Capitol Records deal doesn't just look like a business win, it looks like a survival win. The trajectory from that to signing an 8-figure deal with one of the most historic labels in the music business is almost impossible to map in a clean line. Because the line isn't clean, it's full of detours through courtrooms and jail cells and hospital rooms. It's full of albums dropped from behind bars and streaming records set while on probation. Kodak's rise is maybe the most complicated success story in modern rap, and the Capitol chapter sits right in the middle of it. When Kodak Black officially became a Capitol Records artist, the label needed to see what $30 million actually looked like in the wild. The expectation was productivity. Kodak had always been productive, arguably too productive for a conventional label rollout strategy. He wasn't the type to spend 2 years perfecting a single album. He was the type to drop a project, turn around, and have 3 more ready before anyone finished writing their review of the first one. That energy, that relentless creative output, was part of what made him valuable, but it was also what made him complicated to manage. His second album, Dying to Live, had peaked atop the Billboard 200. It spawned the single Z's featuring Travis Scott and Offset, which peaked at number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100, received sextuple platinum certification by the RIAA, and remains his highest charting song. That's the benchmark Capitol was measuring against. That's the version of Kodak they paid for. And the pressure to reach that level, or exceed it, sat over everything he did in the Capitol era. The first batch of material he delivered under the deal set the tone for what the Capitol relationship would look like. His second album, Dying to Love, yielded his furthest commercial success and peaked atop the Billboard 200. It spawned the single Z's, featuring Travis Scott and Offset, which peaked at 2 on the Billboard Hot 100 and remains his highest charting song. The comparison point was always going to be that album. Every project he released at Capitol would be measured against what that Atlantic era had produced at its peak. But Kodak wasn't slowing down at Capitol. Back for Everything included Super Gremlin, and his 5th and 6th albums, Pistols and Pearls and When I Was Dead, were both released in 2023, while his 7th album, Just Getting Started, was released in 2025, following a series of mixtapes. That's the cadence he operates at. Multiple projects a year, mixtapes between studio albums, singles dropped between projects. The man simply does not stop recording, which, from Capitol's perspective, means the pipeline is always full. From Kodak's perspective, it means he always has leverage. because there's always more products sitting on the hard drive. The 2023 run, especially, was a statement about what kind of artist Capitol had on their hands. Capitol saw Kodak release his 5th studio album, Pistols and Pearls, in 2023, featuring production from heavyweights like Mike Will, Made It. Then a surprise album release, When I Was Dead, appeared in November of that same year. A surprise drop, not an announcement, not a rollout, not a marketing campaign, just Kodak deciding to put out a full project because he felt like it. That's not how labels operate. Labels want lead time. They want press runs and playlisting campaigns and synchronization with streaming platforms. And Kodak just dropped that tension between his approach to releasing music and the label's approach to marketing music is one of the central pressures of the Capitol era. He didn't need the label's machinery the way Atlantic-era Kodak might have. His social media presence, his streaming base, his cultural footprint, all of it was big enough that he could move without waiting for a label rollout. And the more he operated independently within the Capitol deal, the more it started to feel like the deal itself was just a funding mechanism, rather than a genuine partnership. And Capitol was watching all of this with a very close eye on the numbers. Think about the economics of a $30 million signing. That advance isn't a gift, it's a loan against future royalties. Capitol paid $30 million up front, and every project Kodak released under the deal was eating away at that debt. The more he released, the faster the account settled. But also, the more he released without full label involvement in the rollout strategy, the less Capitol could claim credit for the commercial performance, and the less influence they had over the deal's terms. Recording agreements are typically structured so that an artist is required to deliver a certain amount of music during an initial contract period. Labels can then usually choose to pick up an option, which triggers the release of another advance payment and recording budget for the artist to put towards the next project. If the label decides not to pick up the option, it ends its relationship with the artist. That option structure is everything. It's the mechanism by which a label retains or releases an artist, and as Kodak started checking boxes on his delivery obligations, the question of what Capitol would do with those options became the most important question in his business life. But before the options conversation could fully play out, the legal situation came crashing back in. In December of 2023, Kodak Black was arrested in Florida for possession of cocaine and tampering with evidence. He was released from jail in February of 2024. That's 2 months in custody. 2 months where he's not recording, not promoting, not fulfilling contractual obligations. From Capitol's perspective, every time Kodak gets arrested, it's not just a PR problem. It's a scheduling problem, a financial problem, and a legal exposure problem all at once. Florida Highway Patrol had pulled Kodak over after running the plates on his vehicle and finding that the registration was expired. Troopers smelled a strong odor of marijuana and searched the vehicle, at which point they found 31 oxycodone pills and more than $74,000 in cash. Now, his attorney at the time argued those pills were prescribed medication for injuries from the shooting he'd survived in 2022. Bradford Cohen told TMZ the pills were prescribed to his client for pain relief related to the February shooting, saying never judge a case based on an arrest, and noting that he was moving to quickly resolve the charges, which included trafficking in oxycodone and illegal possession of a controlled substance. But whether the legal argument held or not, the headlines were already out there. And headlines like those don't help a label's relationship with sponsors, streaming platform algorithms, or radio. The February 2022 shooting that Bradford Cohen referenced was its own chapter in Kodak's story, and it's one that gives context to everything that followed. On February 12, 2022, Kodak Black was shot during a fight outside a Los Angeles Italian restaurant where Justin Bieber was hosting a Super Bowl week party. Shot at a Super Bowl party at a restaurant in Los Angeles. It's the kind of sentence that reads like fiction but was very much real. He survived, he recovered, and he went straight back to work, which is quintessentially Kodak. But the physical aftermath of that night followed him, and the prescription medication he was carrying when he got pulled over months later was directly connected to the injuries from that shooting. The pattern here is important to understand. Kodak's personal life and his professional life have never operated on separate tracks. Everything bleeds into everything else. The shooting feeds the legal trouble. The legal trouble feeds the label tension. The label tension feeds the independence conversation. And the independence conversation feeds the public's perception of where he is in his career. You can't understand the Capitol relationship without understanding the full loop. What Capitol had signed wasn't just a rapper. They had signed a full-scale soap opera, and they knew it. The question was always whether the music could stay compelling enough to justify the noise around it. For the first couple of years, the answer was yes. The projects were coming. The streams were moving. The culture was still paying attention to Kodak Black in a way that kept the deal's math working in Capitol's favor. But the more the legal clouds accumulated and the more Kodak operated on his own timeline in the studio, the more Capitol started to feel the friction. A label that pays $30 million for an artist expects a certain level of control over the rollout. They expect album cycles that align with marketing windows. They expect an artist who shows up for interviews, for photo shoots, for radio runs. What they got was Kodak, who does things on Kodak's schedule, drops music when Kodak decides, and handles press on his own terms. For some labels, that's fine. For a label that needs to justify a $30 million expenditure to a boardroom, it starts to create tension. And the tension wasn't one-sided. Kodak had his own frustrations, building inside the Capitol relationship. The same itch he'd had at Atlantic. The feeling that the label was getting more value from him than he was getting from them had never fully gone away. The $30 million had scratched it for a while. But money has a funny way of becoming normal very quickly. Once the advance is in your account and you're living at the level you've always wanted to live at, the question shifts from, am I getting paid, to am I getting supported? And there were signs that Kodak didn't feel fully supported inside the Capitol infrastructure. The surprise drops. The independent rollout decisions, the social media announcing projects before the label had finalized release strategy. All of it pointed to an artist who had stopped fully trusting the machine around him and had started operating more and more from his own instincts. The music he was making in this period also reflected a man in transition. Trill Bill quickly followed in late November 2024, and Gift for the Streets was a Christmas present for fans. Released on December 25, 2024, 3 projects in about 2 months. A studio album, another album drop, and a holiday mixtape. That's not a label rollout strategy. That's Kodak doing what Kodak does, which is flood the zone with content and let the audience sort out what they love. Capitol could either ride that wave or fight it, and the direction that relationship was heading suggested they were becoming more uncomfortable with just riding. The content of the music was also shifting in ways that told the story of where he was in his life. Songs about survival, about loyalty, about the weight of being from somewhere that doesn't let you go easily. Those themes had always been in his work, but in the Capitol era, they started to carry a new weight. Because now he wasn't just surviving the streets of Pompano Beach, he was surviving the music industry. And those two things require very different skill sets. His album, Kodak the Blessing, was his final one with Capitol Records, which means he is now independent. A lot of folks were very happy for him, hoping this means there would be even more new music than usual in the future. Kodak the Blessing, the title itself was a statement. This is a blessing. This is the moment I've been building toward. And making it the last record he ever delivered to Capitol was, whether intentional or not, about as definitive a goodbye as you can make. The blessing wasn't just the album. The blessing was walking out. The fan reaction to his independence was immediate and positive. Others pointed to his newfound control of business and industry dealings on his own terms, while some continued to express worry about unrelated legal trouble. In any case, Kodak's fans were ready to support him. That support is the foundation of everything that comes next. Because when you go independent, fan loyalty isn't just nice to have, it's the entire economic model. When a $30 million artist walks out the door, the label doesn't wave goodbye from the porch. The music industry has a long and detailed history of what happens when major labels and major artists part ways, on terms that aren't fully clean. The legal machinery that gets activated in those moments is one of the most complex in entertainment law. And while the specific terms of what Capitol did in response to Kodak's exit aren't all public record, the framework of what happens and what was clearly happening here tells a story that the headlines only partially captured. Many exclusive recording agreements extend for 9 to 12 months past the date that the last album was delivered or released, meaning songs that artists cut during this period still belong to their previous label partner. Contract terms vary, of course, and stars have a lot of negotiating power, which gives them more latitude. That 9 to 12 month exclusivity window is the weapon that labels hold in their back pocket. For exactly this kind of situation, Kodak delivered his final Capitol album. The deal was done. But Capitol's position was that the clock didn't stop ticking the moment the album shipped. The exclusivity extended past the delivery date, which means anything he recorded in that window, any of the music that was building toward his independent chapter, was potentially Capitol's property. That's not a hypothetical threat. That's a real legal position that labels enforce against artists all the time. As one entertainment lawyer explained, artists may not be aware that in most record deals, the recording services remain exclusive during the entire term, and there's often a period of time in between the release of the last project and the end of that exclusive term. The nuance here is critical. There's a difference between the end of the album delivery obligation and the end of the exclusive recording period. Most artists and their managers, and even some of their lawyers, don't fully track that distinction in the heat of transitioning to a new deal. You think you're done. The label knows you're not. The same lawyer noted that the recording services remain exclusive during the entire term, and there's often a period of time in between the release of the last project and the end of that exclusive term, adding, if you're not careful, anything you record during that period is owned by the old label. For Kodak, who records constantly and drops projects at an almost unmanageable pace, the idea that some of his post-Capitol recordings might belong to Capitol is a real and significant threat to his independence. It's not just about one song or one feature. It could be about entire albums worth of material that he recorded while believing he was free. The commercial picture he was walking into as an independent also created pressure that Capitol knew about and could use as leverage. Going independent after a $30 million deal means the financial security net is gone. The advance money has been spent, or at least committed. The label's marketing infrastructure, their connections to streaming platform algorithms, their relationships with radio, their promotional budgets, all of that disappears the moment the deal ends. And Kodak was stepping into independence at a moment when his legal situation was simultaneously getting more complicated. On May 6, 2026, Kodak Black was arrested in Orange County, Florida for drug trafficking of MDMA. The following day, he appeared in court on charges relating to the December 2023 incident and was released on $75,000 bond, according to an affidavit. The charges stemmed from a November 2025 incident in Orlando, in which police searched his vehicle and found items that matched an Instagram post he made prior to the incident. An Instagram post. The evidence in his own case came partly from his own social media. That's the kind of detail that makes lawyers lose sleep. An artist whose online presence is so constant and unfiltered that it becomes discoverable in a criminal proceeding. And Capitol was fully aware of the legal landscape their former artist was navigating. From a label's perspective, Kodak's ongoing legal trouble wasn't just his problem. It was a commercial problem that affected their catalog. They owned the masters on everything he made while under contract. His streams, his sync licensing, his catalog royalties, all of that money flowed through Capitol's infrastructure. And every time Kodak got arrested, every time he went to court, every time his name landed in a headline, tied to drugs or violence or custody disputes, it created a chilling effect on the commercial performance of that catalog. He was reported to be embroiled in a custody battle with Miranda Johnson, the mother of 2 out of his 5 children, while also facing accusations of failure to pay child support and domestic abuse. 5 children, multiple custody proceedings, child support arrears, domestic abuse allegations. Each one of those threads is a separate legal exposure point, a separate PR liability, and a separate drain on the financial and emotional resources of an artist trying to run a business independently. Capitol, sitting on his masters, had a front row seat to all of it and could factor it into how aggressively they enforced whatever contractual leverage they still held. But here's where the story gets really interesting, because Kodak's exit wasn't just a business move. It was a message. When you name your final Capitol album Kodak the Blessing and walk out the door into independence, you're not just fulfilling a contract. You're making a declaration. You're saying, I don't need you. I'm the blessing. Not the deal, not the label, not the $30 million me. The art, the output, the connection to the audience. Others pointed to his newfound control of business and industry dealings on his own terms. That control is what the declaration was actually about, because at every stage of his career, From the 16-year-old who signed with Dolaz and Deals without a lawyer present, to the teenager who signed with Atlantic, to the grown man who moved to Capitol, someone else had been setting the terms. And now, for the first time in his professional life, Kodak was the one setting them. The Dolaz and Deals situation is actually a really instructive early chapter in understanding why Capitol's response hit Kodak the way it did. Currently incarcerated at the time, Kodak Black managed to reach a settlement deal with his first label, Dolaz and Deals Entertainment. He had recently settled a contract dispute with the first label he signed to in 2013, which was reported by Bossip, his very first label. He sued them. He had sued Dolaz and Deals for breach of contract in December. He claimed that the label whose roster he joined when he was just 16 had deceived him into signing without a lawyer present. He also alleged that Dolaz and Deals had failed to meet certain financial obligations stipulated in the contract, and that the company's CEO had been incarcerated and thus unable to maintain the management services that were promised. This matters because Kodak Black has been navigating label disputes, literally, since the beginning of his career. The Dolaz and Deals situation happened when he was still a teenager. He learned early, through painful, direct, first-hand experience, that the music industry will take advantage of you if you let it. That lesson shaped every subsequent negotiation he had, which means by the time he got to Capitol, he wasn't a naive kid anymore. He was a man who had been through the legal system in the music industry and the justice system in real life, and he knew how both of them operated. And the way Capitol responded to his exit was, in some ways, a confirmation of everything that experience had taught him. When labels slam departing artists, they usually do it through a combination of legal positioning, catalog control, and commercial pressure. They don't necessarily file a dramatic lawsuit and hold a press conference about it, though that happens too. More often, they make life difficult, in ways that are harder to see but just as consequential. They control when catalog music gets pushed to streaming services. They decide whether to greenlight sync deals for his songs in films or TV. They determine how aggressively they promote or bury the Atlantic and Capitol catalog, depending on their relationship with the artist in real time. For Kodak, who was going independent and relying heavily on his streaming catalog to fund the next chapter, Capitol's control over those masters was a constant, quiet pressure. Every time he wanted to build on his catalog, sample it, interpolate it, build a new project that referenced the old work, Capitol's shadow was in the room. But Capitol also had to be careful, because slamming Kodak too hard had its own risks. He had $30 million worth of streaming equity with their label. His catalog was performing. His audience was still active and loyal. If Capitol made the exit so hostile that Kodak went to war with them publicly, the way artists have gone to war with labels before, the way T-Swift went to war with Scooter Braun, the way Prince walked around with Slave written on his face, the PR damage could exceed whatever legal advantage they gained. So the Capitol response wasn't a nuclear option. It was a calculated squeeze, legal positioning around the exclusivity window, catalog control as leverage, and a watchful eye on every move Kodak made toward building his independent business. Close enough to remind him they were there, not so aggressive that he had a clean villain to point at in a viral live stream. And the industry watching all of this play out had its own opinions. Young Thug's response to Kodak's independence was one of the most talked about. Reactions in the immediate aftermath. Via Twitter, he offered Kodak a blank check to sign with Young Stoner Life Records. It shows how much Thug respected the Florida rapper artistically and brand-wise, even if they hadn't collaborated much in the past. If he would do a deal with me, I would give that boy whatever he think he want. The Atlanta MC shared a blank check. Write in whatever number you want. That's not a business offer. That's a love letter from one artist to another. And the fact that it came from Young Thug, who was navigating his own enormous legal situation with the YSL Ryko case, made it even more loaded. Some fans supported this proposition, but many assumed Kodak was happy, being independent and clowned Thug for trying to get him back in a label situation. That fan reaction tells you exactly where the culture's head was. When this story broke, people weren't rooting for Kodak to find another label. They were rooting for him to stay free. The independence was the product now. The story of the man controlling his own business had become as compelling as the music itself, which brings us back to Capitol and what their slam actually achieved. In the short term, It maintained their legal position. They protected their catalog rights. They kept the exclusivity window alive as a deterrent against Kodak, immediately flooding the market with new music under his own banner. It was a defensive play, but in the long term, the way the story got framed in public, Capitol Records going after an artist who just walked away, tightening the legal screws on a man who'd already given them everything the deal required. It fit a pattern that the culture had grown deeply suspicious of: labels as the villain, artists as the product, the system as the trap. And Kodak Black, who had been fighting systems his entire life, fit the role of the underdog in that story with an almost perfect symmetry. The thing you have to understand about Kodak Black is that pressure is not a variable in his equation. It's a constant. From the time he was 12 years old, being put in a youth detention center, to the time he was 19, and managing a record contract dispute from inside a jail cell, to the time he was a grown man with an 8-figure deal, and still catching drug charges every few years, the pressure has never stopped. What's changed is how he responds to it. His second album, Dying to Live, yielded his furthest commercial success and peaked atop the Billboard 200 that was recorded and released. While he was navigating a sexual assault case and a federal firearms charge, the music didn't wait for the courtroom drama to resolve. The music came out anyway. That's been his operating mode, his entire career. Keep recording, keep releasing. Don't let the legal weight stop the creative output. And that operating mode is exactly what made the Capitol situation so combustible. Because when you have an artist who fundamentally believes that the only thing that matters is the music, and you pair him with a label that fundamentally believes that the music exists inside a business framework that requires planning and positioning, those two worldviews eventually collide. Capitol needed Kodak to operate like a label artist. Kodak needed Capitol to trust that his instincts had already delivered 34 Billboard Hot 100 entries and multiple top 10 albums. Neither side was wrong. Both sides were right. And that's exactly why the relationship frayed. The releases he was stacking up under Capitol also created a specific kind of problem that the label had to manage in real time. When an artist drops 3 projects in 2 months, the individual projects stop feeling like events. They blend together in the public consciousness. Each new release cannibalizes the streaming window of the previous one before it has time to fully mature commercially. A release that might have generated 3 months of streaming attention gets pushed aside after 3 weeks because the artist already dropped something new. For labels that make money on the back end of those streaming windows, the period of sustained play that generates royalties over months and years, that compression is financially damaging. Trill Bill quickly followed in late November 2024, and Gift for the Streets dropped on December 25, 2024. 2 projects in a month at the end of the year. In the middle of Kodak's exit trajectory from Capitol, Capitol had to decide in real time whether to put marketing resources behind these releases or let them ride on their own momentum. And whatever they decided, Kodak was going to do what Kodak does regardless. The legal backdrop to all of this output is almost impossible to overstate. Kodak Black can't seem to stay out of law enforcement's radar. That's not editorial opinion. That's a documented pattern spanning a decade plus. And within the Capitol era specifically, the legal timeline was relentless. It was reported that he was in federal custody for violating probation, and he was later released in February 2024, violating probation. That means a judge had already decided once that he wasn't following the terms of his supervised release, and now he was back in custody for it. These legal events don't happen in isolation. They have direct commercial consequences. When Kodak is in custody, he can't perform at shows when he can't perform at shows. He can't collect performance fees when he can't collect performance fees. The financial pressure builds. When financial pressure builds, the relationship with a label that holds your advances and your royalties becomes even more charged. But here's what Capitol and everyone else in the industry consistently underestimated about Kodak Black. The audience never left through every arrest, every legal drama, every tabloid headline about custody battles and drug charges. The streaming numbers held, the cultural relevance held, the internet kept talking about him. And that's the most important metric in the modern music business. Are people still paying? Attention? For Kodak, the answer was always yes. Even when the news was bad, even when the content was chaos, the attention didn't waver. His streaming numbers rose 9% the week after one viral incident, and his Instagram follower count grew by 420, zero in a single month in 2026. That's not an artist in decline. That's an artist who has so deeply embedded himself in internet culture that even controversy generates growth. The bad press became marketing, the chaos became content, and the content kept converting into streams and followers and commercial relevance. That dynamic, where chaos functions as a growth engine, is something Capital couldn't fully plan around or monetize efficiently. Traditional label strategy is built on narrative control. You release a single, you build a story around it. You send the artist on press runs to reinforce that story. You work the album cycle through streaming and radio and editorial placements, and then you repeat. The whole thing depends on the artist, operating somewhat predictably within that framework. Kodak's chaos wasn't unpredictable to anyone who'd watched his career. It was completely, reliably, consistently Kodak. But consistently chaotic is not a marketing strategy that a conventional label infrastructure can optimize for. So Capital found itself in the position of trying to build a machine around an artist who wasn't interested in operating inside a machine. The charitable giving side of Kodak's story is another dimension that the Capital situation tends to obscure because it complicates the simple narrative. He donated $10,000 to the Jack and Jill Children's Center, which is a provider of early children's education, and in November 2018 announced that he was building a school in Haiti. He also donated enough money to Paradise Childcare in Broward County to provide gifts for 150 children and donated an additional $5,000 for the organization's annual Christmas party. This isn't a man who forgot where he came from the moment the money came in. This is a man who looked at the communities that shaped him and tried to put resources back into them. In July 2025, Kodak was awarded a key to the city of Pompano Beach, Florida, his hometown. The same city where he was expelled in 5th grade, the same city where he was arrested multiple times before he was old enough to vote. The city gave him a key. That's a full circle that Capitol Records, focused on delivery schedules and exclusivity windows, had no framework to properly value. The key to the city happened right around the same period that his Capitol exit was playing out. The timing is worth sitting with. In the same window where Capitol was asserting its legal position over his masters and his exclusivity, the city of his origin was celebrating him. The industry was squeezing him. His community was honoring him. Two completely different verdicts from two completely different juries delivered at almost the same time. That contrast is at the heart of why people root so hard for Kodak Black even when the conventional wisdom says they shouldn't. The street never turned its back on him. The institutions were always the ones who made things complicated. Capitol was an institution, and institutions, in Kodak's lived experience, are things you navigate, not things you surrender to. His endorsement of Donald Trump in the 2024 election was another moment that split opinion but didn't split his audience. Capri endorsed the Donald Trump 2024 presidential campaign, releasing the single On Boa 47 RD with New York rapper Fivio Foreign in support of Trump, a political endorsement wrapped in a song. That's Kodak doing things his way again, not a quiet public statement, not a carefully worded social media post, but a full track with a collaborator dropped into the culture, like or hate the politics. You cannot argue with the method. He took a position and he put a record behind it. For Capitol, an artist making a political endorsement of that nature during an election year creates its own set of headaches, depending on where the label's other stakeholders sit politically. That kind of move can create uncomfortable conversations in boardrooms and shareholder calls. And Kodak, who has never made political decisions with a corporate partner's comfort in mind, wouldn't have factored any of that into the calculation. All of this adds up to a portrait of an artist who was operating on a completely different set of values than the label holding his contract. Capitol's values: return on investment, predictable commercial cycles, brand management, long-term catalog. appreciation. Kodak's values: creative freedom, community loyalty, survival instinct, raw. That number also has direct implications for the capital relationship. A joint venture means capital participates in those streams commercially. So the SLAM, the assertion of legal rights, the catalog control, the exclusivity pressure, was running parallel to a commercial arrangement, where both parties were still making money from Kodak's output. The adversarial and the cooperative were happening at the same time, which is exactly the kind of complicated situation that only music industry lawyers fully understand. But the legal side of his life kept adding new chapters, even as the music kept climbing. On May 6, 2026, Kodak Black was arrested in Orange County, Florida, for drug trafficking of MDMA. The following day, he appeared in court on charges relating to the December 2023 incident and was released on $75,000 bond. Drug trafficking, MDMA, in Orange County, Florida. That's a serious charge at a serious time. Right in the middle of his independent chapter, right when the commercial picture was starting to look promising, right when the Voltu Records joint venture was supposed to be building towards something sustainable. According to an affidavit, the charges stemmed from a November 2025 incident in Orlando, in which police searched his vehicle and found items that matched an Instagram post he made prior to the incident. The Instagram post, again, the same self-documentation issue that had come up before. There's something almost tragic about it. A man who understands the power of social media well enough to grow his audience by 420 followers in a single month, but who also puts himself in legal jeopardy by posting things that law enforcement can then use against him in court. The same platform that builds the career also becomes the evidence file. The child support and custody situation added another layer of pressure to an already compressed personal and professional landscape. He was reported to be embroiled in a custody battle with Miranda Johnson, the mother of 2 out of his 5 children, while also facing accusations of failure to pay child support and domestic abuse. 5 kids, multiple custody battles, child support proceedings that were still unresolved well into the capital exit period. Each one of those threads takes lawyer time, emotional bandwidth, and money. For an independent artist funding his own operations, those drains compound on each other in ways that a label situation partially insulates against. Because the label has a financial interest in keeping the artist functional, he publicly claimed sobriety since early 2026, but continued to face child support proceedings and scrutiny over viral behavioral incidents. Claiming sobriety while simultaneously facing drug trafficking charges is a tension that the public and the industry both noticed. The narrative of recovery and the narrative of legal trouble were running on parallel tracks, pulling in opposite directions, and neither one was clearly winning. And yet, through all of it, the music didn't stop. That's the through line of this entire story. From the moment he was placed in a youth detention center for the first time, through the Atlantic deal and the Capitol deal, and the exit, and the joint venture, and the arrests, and the custody battles, and the political endorsements, and the charitable donations, and the key to the city, the music never stopped. His 5th and 6th albums, Pistols and Pearls, and When I Was Dead, were both released in 2023, while his 7th album, Just Getting Started, was released in 2025, following a series of mixtapes. That's not the output of a man who is losing. That's the output of a man who processes the world through creation. Kodak Black's career has been marked by periods of mainstream success, as well as public controversies and legal issues. That's as clean a summary as you'll find anywhere. Success and chaos, coexisting, neither one canceling the other out. The mainstream success is real. The Billboard placements, the streaming numbers, the platinum certifications are all documented. The controversies and legal issues are equally real. And the remarkable thing about Kodak Black's career is that neither set of facts has been able to fully defeat the other. The Young Thug blank check offer sits in this story as one of its most telling moments. Beyond the business offer, Kodak Black and Young Thug had also shared solidarity with each other. Kodak's attorney Bradford Cohen had expressed support for Thug's lawyer, Brian Steele, after he was arrested amid the YSL RICO case. That's not just 2 rappers being friendly. That's a Florida artist standing up for an Atlanta artist when his legal team was being targeted. Cohen going public with support for Steele during the RICO case was a statement about solidarity across the rap world, about artists and their teams recognizing that the legal attacks on one of them were a threat to all of them. And when Thug turned around and offered a blank check, it was reciprocal. That's how these relationships work in hip-hop at the highest level. Loyalty isn't just a lyric, it's a transaction. You show up for me when I'm in trouble. I show up for you when you need to eat. The blank check was the return on the investment Cohen had made by standing up for Steele. But Kodak didn't take the deal, and the reasons why tell you everything about where his head is. Many assumed Kodak was happy being independent and clowned Thug for trying to get him back in a label situation. Happy being independent after everything, after Capitol, after Atlantic, after Delaz and deals, after every contract dispute, and every label frustration, Kodak Black had decided that the most valuable thing he had was the freedom to move on his own terms. And no blank check from a friend, however real the love behind it, was worth surrendering that. That decision to stay independent, even when the offers were on the table, is the most significant business move of his career, because it says that the lesson of Capitol wasn't just about money, it was about control, about who has final say over the art, about whether the business around the music serves the music or the other way around. And Capitol, in its response to his exit, inadvertently reinforced that lesson. The legal positioning, the catalog control, the exclusivity window enforcement, all of it sent the same message that Atlantic had sent when they refused to renegotiate his deal. The message was, we see you as an asset. We measure you in advance recoupment and royalty streams and option periods. We value your music in terms of what it generates for us, not in terms of what it means to you. And Kodak Black, who started rapping because it was the only alternative to selling drugs with a gun on his hip, had no patience left for that framing. The key to the city of Pompano Beach is the better measure. Not because it pays more, it pays nothing, but because it comes from the people who knew him before the deals and the features and the billboard placements. It comes from the community that was there when he was making the choices that determined whether he'd have a career at all. That's the verdict that matters, and Capitol Records had no mechanism to compete with it. So where does this leave the story? Kodak Black, at the midpoint of 2026, is an artist in active legal jeopardy, running an independent business through a joint venture with a label that just slammed him, releasing music at a pace that few artists in any era have matched, dealing with personal chaos that would have ended most careers, and somehow still growing his audience. The streaming numbers are going up. The follower counts are going up. The cultural conversation around him is as active as it's ever been. He stated in February 2026 that he wishes ICE would deport him there, in reference to Haiti, a remark widely interpreted as rhetorical, emotionally charged, and factually inaccurate, since he holds U.S. citizenship. That comment triggered discussion about mental health transparency in hip-hop, but did not result in immigration action. Even that moment, confusing, raw, uncomfortable, added to the ongoing conversation about who Kodak Black actually is, what he's going through, and what his story means. That's not a man who has become irrelevant. That's a man whose public presence remains so charged that everything he says lands as a cultural event. The Capitol chapter, when you look at it from this vantage point, was not the ending anyone predicted. When that $30 million deal was announced, it wasn't the chapter where Kodak finally got the support structure he needed to produce, the crossover masterpiece that matched the commercial potential. It wasn't the chapter where the label and the artist aligned perfectly and built something lasting together. And it wasn't the chapter where Capitol got a clean, profitable run on a superstar they'd invested in.